The Stanley Cup Final has finally ended, and a new champion was crowned, but the grind still does not end. The draft is in a few days, development camp is in a few days, and free agency is also in a few days. It's going to be a busy time amongst the NHL discourse, and there's a potential defenseman that the Devils might sign come July 1st. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils Wire for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I am not in my normal studio. I am currently hunkered down in Las Vegas, Nevada, because I will be covering the NHL draft in a few days. I'm looking forward to the event, and according to the NHL media site, the draft will be the first TV broadcast event from the Sphere. I'm also excited to see how the stage is going to lay out, the lights, the camera. I already know some people that I've associated with in the past. They're going to be in attendance at the draft. I'm excited to do a few meetups, and I'm going to give you guys the behind the scenes coverage. But in the meantime, let's just talk about the chaos surrounding the NHL. First and foremost, congratulations to the Florida Panthers for clinching their first ever Stanley Cup in franchise history. It took them 30 years, but they finally got a Stanley Cup added to their resume. They did not make it easy on themselves, going up 3-0, and the Oilers almost overcoming that deficit and pulling off the reverse sweep. But a win is a win, and they got that Stanley Cup. I'm going to talk more about that in the third and final segment because, as you guys know, in prior episodes, I shared my thoughts on Stanley Cup games, who I thought was going to win. I originally picked Panthers in 6, but after the Oilers defeated them in Game 5, Connor McDavid was going on a point streak. He had back-to-back 4-point outings. I was just like, I'd be a little concerned if I'm the Panthers, but I'm still sticking to them, and they finally got it done. I really enjoyed the Stanley Cup Final. I know the coverage, especially on ESPN, some people have mixed emotions about it, but from my perspective, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think the ratings also show. But we'll talk more about that in the third and final segment. And also, for the first time since 2003, I think all Devils fans remember that year, the Conn Smythe Trophy was given to a player that was on the losing team. Oh, boy. I wonder if Martin Brodeur still has strong emotions towards that decision years and years ago. But we'll talk about that to close out today's episode. The next few days is going to also be hectic. All right, the Stanley Cup Final just concluded, finally, after 7 games. But like I just said, the NHL draft is in a few days. And it was recently announced that the Devils will host their development camp starting June 30th. And July 1st is the start of free agency. The Devils PR team and all other PR teams in the NHL, they're going to have their hands full. And I think it raises an important question, which is, why is the scheduling the way it is? I think the NHL needs to do a better job of giving themselves some breathing room in between these big events, because it's all clustered into one, and it puts a lot of stress on not only the players, but the PR teams, people like me who cover the team. It's madness. But if I'm being honest with myself, I got it better than most people because like I said, the PR teams, they're going to have their hands full. While we're on the subject of free agency, which once again will open up on July 1st, let's talk about a potential free agent signing for the Devils, and that is Brett Pesce. I mentioned him briefly in the previous episode in which I did a crossover with Jersey Joe of Draft Pro Hockey, but let's talk more about Pesce and what he could potentially bring to the roster. In the first segment, we'll talk about some of the reports making its way around the NHL discourse. I will share some of his stats. And then in segment 2, I'll play some sound bites from his exit interview in which he talked about a potential new contract and where his headspace is at. And I will also share my thoughts as to whether or not the Devils should pursue him. And then in the third and final segment, like I just said a few minutes ago, I thoroughly enjoyed the Stanley Cup Final, and I want to talk about it because it was the final game of the 2023-2024 season. All right, Pesce. First, a couple fun facts. Jersey Joe actually texted me this. He said, Pesce in Italian means fish. So if he does end up signing with the Devils, think of it as Tomas Tatar 2.0, because as we all know, Tomas Tatar's nickname was Tuna, and Pesce means fish in Italian. There we go. Have some fun right there. And Pesce is a East Coast native. He did grow up in New York, but he played his amateur youth hockey within New Jersey, eventually playing with the New Jersey Hitmen of the Eastern Junior Hockey League, and he committed to play at the University of New Hampshire. I think it's safe to say that the East Coast is near and dear to Pesce's heart, but let's talk about him as a hockey player and where he stacked up amongst other Hurricanes players. This season for Pesce, he appeared in 70 games. He had 3 goals, 10 assists for a grand total of 13 points, and he actually got hurt during the playoffs, and he revealed that it was an ankle injury, and he was trying his best to come back from it, but he just never fully recovered from it. And it was initially reported as a lower body injury, but he went into more detail during his exit interview. Elliot Friedman recently went on 32 Thoughts, and he said there's some rumblings that the organization is interested in Pesce, and a few other Devil sites, including NJ.com, was reporting on it. All right, when it comes to Pesce, he's a right-handed defenseman. He doesn't really focus on offense, but his defense is pretty good. Amongst other Hurricanes players, he had a plus-minus rating of +10, which ranked 11th on the team. He had an average ice time of about 20 minutes, which was 8th on the team. He had a defensive point share rating of 4.1, 4th on the team, a point share rating of 3.9, 12th on the team, and he racked up 113 blocks, which was 2nd on the team. And if I've said it once, I've said it a few other times during the course of the offseason, that I think when it comes to blocks, the Devils sort of struggled with that this past season. And getting someone like Pesce added to that roster, he can definitely help in that regards, because the Devils need some help out in front of their goalies in Markstrom and Allen. But here's something that kind of concerns me. Like I said, he's not really going to focus on offense, and he had an offensive point share rating of -0.2, which was tied for last on the Hurricanes roster alongside Jesper Fast. And why do I say that's a little bit of a concern? Well, let's think about it. I've said it in prior episodes that the Devils are in need of some more defensive depth, especially since they lost Ryan Graves and Damon Severson last offseason, and they tried to replace them with Nemitz and Hughes. And unfortunately, both of them don't have that much significant experience, and they got exposed as the season progressed. But that was to be expected. Every rookie hits a wall at some point, and that was a lot of pressure added onto their shoulders. But injuries to someone like Hamilton and Siegenthaler certainly didn't make things any easier. What made the Devils so successful during the 2022-2023 season? They had some solid combinations when it came to defense. On the right side, you had players like Dougie Hamilton, John Marino, and Damon Severson. Then on the left side, you had Ryan Graves, Jonas Siegenthaler, and Brendan Smith, Kevin Ball, or Luke Hughes, give or take. It really depended on the circumstance of the season and which team the Devils were going to be playing. But once again, the Devils lost Ryan Graves and Damon Severson last offseason, and that really left a big gaping hole in their defensive structure, and Hughes and Nemitz got exposed. So the name of the game this offseason is to add more defense, and Pesce can definitely help in that regards. But going back to his offense, he's not going to contribute offensively, and that's fine. But the one thing for Pesce is that he cannot hinder the offensive attack for the Devils. Players like Graves and Severson, they were more than capable of contributing offensively, but they knew what their roles on the team had to be. And the same can be said for Marino, Siegenthaler that season as well, which is, all right, if you're not going to contribute when it comes to offense as a defenseman, don't hinder the offensive attack. And that's exactly what players like Severson and Graves did. Their impact sometimes didn't show up in the score sheet, but their impact was still felt, if that makes sense. I've used this example many times. Damon Severson was notoriously known for being an offensive-minded defenseman. But as the Devils got better, especially with adding someone like Dougie Hamilton to the roster, Severson knew he had to take a bit of a back seat, and he became a bottom four defenseman, and his offensive numbers went down, but he still suited up in 81 of the 82 potential games. The one game he missed, he made a big mistake against the Philadelphia Flyers that costed the Devils the game. So Lindy Ruff had no choice but to make him a healthy scratch as punishment. But Severson was still vital during the rest of the season, and he still played a decent role come playoff time. And Pesce has to do the same thing, which is don't hinder the offense, but you do need to contribute defensively because that's what the Devils are potentially going to be paying you for. And when it comes to penalty minutes, when it comes to hits, he's not really going to stand out in either of those categories. If I had to make an educated guess, and this is just coming from an outside perspective, when I see Pesce go up against the Devils, I think he just knows where to position himself. And I think that can also be vital for the Devils team moving down the line. If Pesce is added to this roster, the Devils are going to be stacked when it comes to right-handed defensemen. A tough decision will have to be made. The Devils, if they sign Pesce to a contract, could potentially have 5 right-handed defensemen on their roster. Marino, Hamilton, Nemitz, Pesce, and DeSimone. Who do you play on their offhand? The Devils tried that with Marino, but it didn't really work all that well. Dougie Hamilton, it doesn't matter if you put him on his offhand or whatever the case might be. Hamilton is still going to be somewhat of a liability defensively, but he can make up for it on the offensive side of things. And you really want Dougie to play on the right-handed side, if you ask me. So Sheldon Keefe might have to get unique in that sort of sense, but I don't think it's that big a deal. But when looking at all the other categories for Pesce, I think he would be a solid contributor and a good depth asset to have for this Devils team. Now, what would his contract look like, and what's his headspace at in terms of contract negotiations? We'll talk about that momentarily, but before we continue, I want to tell you guys about Game Time. I've actually used Game Time before to purchase myself some MLB and NBA tickets, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Toggling this feature shows a total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. That's all-in pricing. Seat views. Get a good view of your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's analyze Pesce from a contract standpoint. What would his contract look like, and where is his headspace at? He recently spoke on negotiations and what he wants to do moving forward during his exit interview. Take a listen.
Knowing that this team has so many pieces to bring back, and because you love Carolina so much, are you aware of, does that kind of make you aware as you go through the negotiating process that, hey, maybe it would be better to take a team-friendlier deal in order to come back and have so many core pieces come back?
Of course. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's, if you take all this money, sometimes it makes the team worse, and kind of just depends what you value, and obviously I've been through both ends where our team wasn't very good to now. It's much easier to go to the rink every day and do what you love. So, yeah.
Do you feel like that's a common mentality that among players in the league or even on the team where people are more kind of conscious that, hey, it's better to take a little less money but play on a winning team?
Yeah, I can't speak for the league because obviously I've only been here, but I think on our team, yeah. It's fun to win and to be in a winning culture like this. And obviously we haven't gotten over that hump, but it's kind of you can't put a price on coming to the rink every day and winning and being happy. So
You already had a team-friendly deal, so you know what it's like.
yeah.
I found this snippet on the Hockey News, and it says, according to AFP Analytics, Pesce's contract is projected to have a term in the range of 5 years and an average annual value of $6.2 million. And some people are wondering, would he take a team-friendly deal with the Hurricanes? Well, similar to what he said during his exit interview, it's acknowledged that the Hurricanes, they might be in a salary cap crunch. And if we look at our handy-dandy cap-friendly, which, by the way, use cap-friendly as much as you can before the site goes dark in a few weeks, here are some notable players that are set to become unrestricted free agents. Gensel, Martinuk, Nason, Teravainen. Jarvis is a pending RFA. He's going to need a new contract. So the thing is like the Hurricanes, they might have to make a sacrifice here or there. And I'm sure he would like to take a team-friendly deal. But similar to Damon Severson's situation last offseason, if you have an opportunity to cash big, then you got to take it. Pesce will make a lot more in unrestricted free agency. And if the Devils have room, I think they should definitely look at his services, which leads to the main question. Should the Devils sign Pesce to a contract? I'm going to say yes, because I've been preaching on this show the last few weeks that the Devils need more depth when it comes to defensemen. They already lost a left-handed defenseman in Kevin Ball. They're going to have to fill that out. As I said in the previous segment, the Devils have a decent amount of right-handed defensemen. Marino, Hamilton, Nemitz, Pesce, and DeSimone. And like I've been saying in this episode and also prior episodes, that depth is definitely a priority for the Devils when it comes to defense, because that's what made them so successful during the 2022-2023 campaign. And I think Pesce would definitely be a solid addition. The one thing that does concern me a little bit is the fact that the Devils have a decent amount of players that are signed long-term. You got your core four, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Timo Meier, and a few other players like Dougie Hamilton, Andre Palat, John Marino, Jonas Siegenthaler that are also signed long-term. Dawson Mercer, he needs a new contract. Hughes and Nemitz, they're still on their entry-level deals. The one thing I just got to advise for Tom Fitzgerald and company is that be very cautious when it comes to working out these contracts, because sooner or later that money is going to run out. I do project for the Devils to make a big deal during the course of the offseason and trying to get maybe one of those contracts off the books, because Fitzgerald has said that he wants to go big game hunting, and I don't think he's just going to stop at Markstrom. I think he still has a few other goals in mind, but obviously getting a defenseman, that's also a priority, and everything else is gravy. And I personally believe that Fitzgerald is a very intelligent general manager. He's aware of the situation, and we'll see what pans out for New Jersey. But for the time being, I think Pesce would be a solid contributor on the Devils' blue line. As long as he doesn't hinder the offensive attack for New Jersey, while he might not be the most physical defenseman, he knows where to position himself. He was tops on the Hurricanes team in blocks, and he knows how to throw his weight around, similar to what I said in my discussion with Jersey Joe in yesterday's episode. Okay, let's talk about Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, in which the Florida Panthers defeat the Edmonton Oilers 2-1. I must say, I feel bad for Edmonton fans because the Oilers did something incredible. They erased a 3-0 deficit, forced it to Game 7, And I would say that's going to go down as one of the best Stanley Cups in recent memory. It was definitely better than the NBA Finals. I don't think the World Series between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers did all that well in terms of ratings. Super Bowl always does well because it's a worldwide phenomenon. But the Stanley Cup Final, Game 7, I saw a stat that the ratings were really high, and that I think it was one of the most watched Stanley Cup Finals since 2013. And I think more people were put on to Connor McDavid and just how incredible he actually is. PK Subban was on ESPN. He was also on First Take, Pat McAfee show, spreading the word of hockey like he always does. He said that if Connor McDavid was able to lead the Oilers to the reverse sweep and hoist up the Stanley Cup, then you have to put him in the conversation of all-time greats. Honestly, and this might be a hot take, I think McDavid is already there. If he's not, he's very, very close. He just accomplished something that had not been done since 2003. Does that year sound familiar for Devils fans? It should, because that's when the Devils hoisted up their third Stanley Cup in history. And unfortunately, people to this day say that Martin Brodeur was robbed of the Conn Smythe Trophy. It went to John Sebastian Jaguar, the opposing goalie for the Mighty Ducks. To this day, I'm sure the Devils care more about the Stanley Cup than they do the Conn Smythe Trophy, and I think the same could be said for the Florida Panthers. And people were saying like Sergei Bobrovsky was robbed. Well, here's the thing. Bobrovsky wasn't the sharpest in those 3 games in which the Oilers won 3 in a row. He almost made the same mistake that he made in last year's playoffs, in which he got off to a really good start. He was making the phenomenal saves, but unfortunately, he got humbled in a few games and he was brought back down to earth. This time around, he was able to put up another strong performance in order to solidify the Game 7 victory. But Connor McDavid, and hopefully I don't step on any toes here, because I do have mixed emotions about this. As someone who covers the Devils, I wholeheartedly do believe that Martin Brodeur was robbed in 2003 of the Conn Smythe Trophy. And obviously, people always use that as a weak argument, saying that Brodeur is not the greatest of all time because he has 3 cups, but no Conn Smythe trophies. He's overrated, this, that, and the third. And I always say that is complete BS. Brodeur, in my opinion, is the greatest goalie to ever play this game, and the stats show it. Look at wins, look at games played, look at shoutouts. Anyway, that can be an argument for a different time. But for Connor McDavid, he did something that had not been accomplished since Wayne Gretzky in 1988. He now holds the record for most assists in a playoff run with 34. The previous record holder, like I said, was Gretzky when he did that in 1988 with 31. And anytime you could surpass Wayne Gretzky in something, you know you did something incredible. And he was right on the doorstep of breaking another Gretzky record for most points in a single playoff run. Gretzky holds that record with 47. McDavid finished off with 42. The thing is like, I think the reason why people are a little mixed about it is because McDavid got shut down in Game 7 and also Game 6. However, the Oilers ended up winning Game 6. I don't think people are going to toss and turn at night about that because, once again, the Oilers squeaked away with the victory. But Game 7, probably one of the biggest games in McDavid's career. And he was human in that game. He tried everything, but the Panthers had an answer defensively. And it wasn't just McDavid. I think it was the Oilers in general. They were just struggling with zone entries. And at that point, they needed some sort of miracle. They needed a power play or a lucky redirect to fall their way, and it just didn't happen. The referees, they swallowed their whistle for the most part in Game 7, which I'm not going to complain about. Let the boys play. But let me play devil's advocate here. Yes, McDavid, he didn't have a good showing in Game 7, and he should be held accountable with the rest of his team. But is that a credit to McDavid, or is it a credit to the Florida Panthers for changing up their game plan? Because I think a lot of people need to give the Panthers more credit. It's one of the reasons why I picked the Panthers to win the Stanley Cup in the first place, because I said up and down the roster, they're the better team. They have good offense, they have good defense, and they have great goaltending. They have the full trifecta, and I said it was going to be really hard for the Oilers to beat them 4 times out of 7. And I said it was going to be incredibly hard for them to make it a series after going down 3-0. And I think the Oilers got somewhat desperate with their line combinations, because you saw that McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman were playing heavy minutes down the stretch to the point where they were absolutely gassed. You saw in that final 2-minute frame, the Oilers could not set up shop. They were looking for those breakout passes, and they got snuffed out. And it was pretty lackadaisical. Your season is hanging by a thread. You need to get this goal to send it to OT to keep your season alive. And they pulled Stuart Skinner from the game a little too late, in my opinion. They should have done it just a tad bit earlier, so that way they could give themselves some more time and not put that kind of pressure on themselves. But we saw that the Panthers, they weren't giving them an inch of breathing room to operate, and the puck got jammed into the near side corner, and all the Panthers had to do was just waste that precious clock, because it was their friend. And once 000s hit the board, the Panthers were officially the 2024 Stanley Cup champions. I think McDavid getting shut down in Game 7 is just a credit to the Panthers changing up their game plan. And I think they deserve a lot more credit. And I know people give McDavid the nickname McJesus, but at the end of the day, none of these players are godlike. They're all human at the end of the day. And humans get fatigued. Humans get tired. And unfortunately for McDavid, he was playing heavy minutes. He was carrying the team on his back. He had back-to-back 4-point outings in games 4 and 5. He was doing everything he could to keep his team afloat. Unfortunately, they just ran out of gas. Anyway, I think the better team at the end of the day won. And McDavid getting the Conn Smythe Trophy, I guess people view it as controversial, because it's just like he wasn't on the winning team, but he just went on an amazing run during the playoffs and did something that hadn't been done in years. And he did something that not even Wayne Gretzky was able to do in the Stanley Cup Final. Back-to-back 4-point outings. That is incredible. And he was the one who made it a series. I get it. John Sebastian Jaguar. People have mixed emotions about that, especially Devils fans. But in this case, I think it was the right decision to give McDavid the Conn Smythe Trophy. Anyway, hell of a game to close out the 2023-2024 NHL season. Now we got a few months of no hockey, but the job is still not finished. Like I said, you got the draft, you got development camp, you got free agency, and the Devils can make a trade at any given moment. And I will have the updates for you here on Locked On Devils and also Pucks and Pitchforks. But let me know what you guys think. Are you interested in the Devils pursuing Brett Pesce? And how do you think he'll contribute to the roster? And what are your thoughts on the Stanley Cup Final? I think it was a great battle, great 7-game series, and I think a lot of people are going to be talking about it for years to come. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TrainMat4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.